Aborting more than 1 of every 4 pregnancies, creating human clones, eliminating our elderly with euthanasia. Is this how we should deal with human life? Find out how you can make a difference in changing our culture in this edition of Life Matters. Brian Johnston is the Western Director of the National Right to Life Committee. He has served in many capacities while advocating for innocent lives, as California Commissioner on Aging, as Chairman of the California Pro-Life Council, on the board of the National Legal Center for the Medically Dependent and Disabled. And now here's our host, Brian Johnston.
Welcome to Life Matters. Life Matters is your program on the right to life, where we talk about what the right to life is. It's a very simple principle. It was stated by America's founding fathers, and it says that the role of government is pretty straightforward. Government didn't give you your life, but the government has a job. You've been given your life by your Creator. The government's job is to protect the lives of the innocent, to make sure that those lives, which are precious, are not taken by others. That's the reason government comes into existence. That's one of the principles of a just government. So we focus on the right to life, understanding what it is and understanding why it needs to be protected. And I'm very honored today to have Dr. Patrick Marmion. You're going to hear more about him. We're going to talk about the whole issue of medical ethics and the Hippocratic Oath, its implications for you right now. So this is Dr. Patrick Marmion. Hello, Pat. Good to see you.
Hello, Brian, and your audience. Good to be with you today.
Dr. Marmion has been an incredible ally in the pro-life movement. I want to say this, every doctor should be. Literally, it's a profession that every doctor, if they honor the principles of medicine, and particularly Western civilization's medicine, that's known as the Hippocratic Oath. In the Hippocratic tradition, the doctor swears that he's only going to help you. A doctor is there to help you and never hurt you, and swears that they will never, ever, even if tempted, and even if asked, they will not harm and kill another human being. So Dr. Marmion has honored that in many ways and has paid the price, because we have a culture that's abandoned that. But I just want to remind you, every doctor should honor that oath. And after this program, you need to spend time with your own doctor and talk to them about the Hippocratic Oath and remind them as to why they should embrace it. And a lot of times, I've done this with every physician I have. One of the first things they say is, well, I wouldn't do that. So, oh, okay. Well, would you refer to someone who would? Yeah, I would refer. Well, then I'm not sure I want to work with you. Because think of it this way, it's like a policeman who says, hey, I'm a good cop. I don't shake down liquor stores. There are some cops that go around and they collect protection money. They get a little extra money on the side, but I'm a good cop. I don't do that. But you're saying there are cops that'll do it? Yeah, but I'm not one of those. But wait a second. Are you willing to tolerate that in your profession? And if a cop is willing to tolerate that in their profession, that's not a good cop. The profession itself is dedicated to protecting others, both in the case of policemen and in the case of doctors. You as a consumer need to know that. You need to know that. Don't think that medical ethics has to be made up and enforced by doctors. Because if the police get to make up their own ethics, that's called a police state. If the military, if the army can make up its own ethics, they have deadly tools. They have very, very deadly tools. And that's what they do for a living. They go around killing people and destroying things. But if they can have their own ethics, you have a military dictatorship. If medicine can come up with its own rules and hold themselves accountable to no one else, you are living in a dystopia controlled by medicine's use of killing. Medicine can be used as a weapon if it's not committed to the Hippocratic Oath. So we're going to give Dr. Marmion a chance. Pat, tell us a little bit about your background as an OBG and your background in general medicine.
Oh, well, thanks, Brian. Yeah, I'm trained in obstetrics and gynecology. After I was in medical school when abortion became forced upon us by our Supreme Court in 1972. And there's a lot of pressure immediately with the professors to be involved in abortion and promote it. But we should promote it as well. So was an ethical dilemma right away for me in my training. Brian, I chose obstetrics because it's such a life-affirming branch of medicine. People are looking forward to a good outcome. We can help the mothers through the pregnancy and help them deliver a healthy baby. So when I got into my residency, abortion had already been pretty much enshrined for 3 years. And it was a very militant ascendancy in medicine that pushed for abortion to begin with and now wanted to squelch all dissent of professionals that would dispute the ethics of performing abortions. So there was a lot of concerted effort to weed out physicians or physicians in training or medical students who did not honor the abortion, killing babies ethic. So at that time, for example, in California, the University of California in San Diego had a matching program for the OBGYN program where they would take a pool of residents that would not do abortions and they screen them for that on their interviews. Then they'd have a pool of candidates who would do abortions. Then on match day, they would fill all of their spaces with the pool of applicants who had no problem performing abortions. And this group of pro-life residents, potential residents, were excluded from training. And that's what's happened in medicine, is that the pro-life physicians have been dissuaded from going into obstetrics, and it's allowed the tiers of authority and ascendancy and the sort of organizational chart to be completely controlled at the top by pro-abortionists. So as a result, there's very few people in the field that will speak out, because if you do, you're still going to be persecuted for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I experienced. I actually gave a resident talk at University of California, San Diego. And unbeknownst to me, they had this policy in place, but I was in San Diego at a Catholic hospital, Brian, and I gave a talk on abortion complications, because in my own clinic at the Catholic hospital, I was treating a woman who could not get pregnant because she had had an abortion 6 years earlier in Mexico. Now she was infertile. So I used her as a case presentation on abortion complications, and that indeed, if women are going to volunteer for this, they need to be informed of what abortion can do and what the immediate and the long-term sequelae are. And as you can imagine, UCSD was a big abortion center in San Diego, and here was the resident from the Catholic hospital speaking out against abortion. And I got fired from the Catholic hospital for creating morale problems and insubordination.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
very alarming.
It is. And that happened. That's just an idea of what the pressure was then. And they're much more militant now. They're so empowered by the radical Democrats that they're pushing the envelope even further and further, now making it unethical for me to practice as an obstetrician because I refuse to do abortions, or, as you mentioned earlier, to refer for abortions. And by their standard, that's unethical. And that for unethical behavior, like the policeman, you could be discharged and lose your license in California.
It's extraordinary, and I'm hoping that listeners understand what that means. Many listeners are following our culture at large, and you're seeing a very strange thing happen to our culture. The woke movement is requiring political ideology that if you don't adhere to, you'll be punished. You will be punished. And people are seeing that now. It's a dystopia that we live in. But it's been here for a while, and this is what Dr. Marmion is reminding you of. If you're not a medical professional, and especially an OBG, you wouldn't have seen this creeping in and how oppressive it is. But even if you're pro-life, you've been against abortion for a long time, you don't realize what's happened to your profession, the medical profession. I believe it's one of the most important professions in our society. and it's been taken over and perverted. Literally, there's a word, it's a big word, but it's not that tough. It's transmogrify. And transmogrify means turned into a monster. And you're taking a profession that is designed to help people and only help people, committed, sworn to only help. And instead, they become the killers of human beings when they're most vulnerable. When we come back, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why it's not just doctors, you as a human being, as a citizen, need to understand this. You need to hold doctors accountable. And we'll talk about how to do that. This seems hard. It's a tough issue. Again, you live in a dystopia. And if you need to know what that means, we'll go into depth on that too, if you need to. You're listening to Life Matters, your radio show on the right to life issue and what it really is and what you can do about it. We'll be right back after this.
You're listening to Life Matters.
We are individuals that lived all over the world.
In some of the most beautiful jungles and mountains on Earth.
We were there as missionaries, but we have also become coffee aficionados.
Our travels have introduced us to the most delicious and extraordinary coffee we've ever tasted.
Now we import those same beans,
Roast them fresh at your request,
and fly these savory coffees directly to you.
Winged Spur Coffee. You will taste that rich freshness,
Roasted at your command.
then flown straight to your home.
Winged Spur Coffee. Try the best coffee you've ever tasted.
Go to wingedspurcoffee.com. That's wingedspurcoffee.com.
And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Well, welcome back to Life Matters, your program on the right to life. And there's a lot. If you've listened to us before, there are a lot of things in the right to life because it impacts your life and it impacts society in so many ways. This isn't just about mommies and babies. A lot of people seem to think that's what this is about. No, it's much bigger. I wrote a book about that. That book is out now. It was just released. It's called The Evil Twins, Roe and Doe, How the Supreme Court Unleashed Medical Killing. And that's available right now on Amazon. And basically, what we have is a situation that a lot of people don't fully understand. They don't fully get what happened on January 22nd of 1973 and what the Supreme Court did. Yes, they authorized killing human babies. In the U.S., every state at that time had laws against killing babies. Even liberal states like California, Colorado, and New York and Massachusetts, they had laws protecting those babies, but those 4 states had laws that said you need some kind of reason. And you've heard that list of reasons. What about rape? What about incest, life of the mother, severe fetal deformity? Those reasons were offered by those states. But then each of those states also said, after 20 weeks in California, 25 in Massachusetts, but after a certain point, that baby's big. That's a human baby. We don't care if there's something wrong. You can't kill that baby. Every state in the union said that's a human baby. And yet the Supreme Court knocked down all those laws and said, no, we're going to have abortion on demand. The implications are great. And Dr. Marmion is joining us to talk about those implications. The very first one is this. If we're going to kill human babies, well, who's going to do it? And that's where the Supreme Court came up with the answer. It was Justice Blackmun. I get into it in the book, why he did it the way he did it. But he put it in Doe v. Bolton, where he assigned doctors will do the killing, and there's no one that can question them. They can kill human babies. If in their mind, they think the baby should be killed, then they'll do it. And that is frightening. And the implications are still with us. And we're going to talk now with Dr. Marmion about some of those implications and what does it mean for you in your society, for your family and children, for your friends and loved ones, and really for the kind of world we live in. So that's Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton, the evil twins. Those are twin decisions Many people have heard of Roe v. Wade. There's a movie out right now on Roe v. Wade, but they don't mention Doe v. Bolton. And it's Doe v. Bolton, the conjoined. It's what literally they did is tied the decisions together. And then Doe v. Bolton commanded it's doctors that can do this. By the way, quick aside, very clear in both Roe and Doe, women do not have the authority to get an abortion when they want. Women and the feminists were really upset. Years later, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was really upset and condemned Roe and Doe because she said it wasn't woman-centric. It doesn't give a woman the right to choose. It only gives doctors the right to do what they want to do. See, the feminists wanted self-abortion. And if you're familiar with radical feminism, there's groups of radical feminists that teach each other how to kill their babies. It's kind of vicious. And we go into that in the book. But Roe v. Wade denied that to them and said, no, only doctors can kill, only doctors. And again, against the medical ethics, against the Hippocratic Oath. And that's come at great cost to the entire profession. And again, we have Dr. Patrick Marmion. Dr. Marmion was trained as an OBG, but he's also gone into general practice. He's got a lot of, you might mention some of your other background, Dr. Pat.
Yeah, well, actually, when I mentioned earlier that I lost my position as a chief resident in obstetrics and gynecology because of a conference I gave on abortion complications, and in which I insisted that physicians need to really give women all the risks of the procedure they're about to voluntarily go through. And after that, I was barred from practicing obstetrics because I hadn't completed my training. And that's when I did general practice. I worked for Kaiser Permanente in San Diego County. And eventually I got back into being able to complete my residency, Brian. And I was able to finish that in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at St. Joseph's Hospital. 7 years later, for 7 years, I was prevented even from delivering a baby, if you can imagine that. Wow. My passion. So, but I eventually did. And you mentioned wokeness and woke. Woke wasn't mentioned back in those days, but it's a euphemism, Brian. It's a euphemism for mean, M-E-A-N, another four-letter word. Woke right. Sounds so much more acceptable than being mean. But that's basically what they are. They're mean-spirited people that if you have a differing viewpoint, you're going to be excluded and you're going to do what they say or face the consequences.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And it has brought a lot of tragedy in its wake. And we're seeing it now in the culture at large. But the medical profession has been under this pressure now for years. And it's translating into danger for you in your life when you go to see a doctor. Some of you who know my background, I've been involved with nursing homes and been involved as an advocate for those who are developmentally limited and people who are medically dependent. And there's great danger because they're seen as less than. They're not fully persons. And therefore, that's what we see in these babies. They're not fully a person, so who's going to miss them? They won't cost us anything, and they're disposable. And if human lives are disposable, my friend, you're living in a dystopia. When we come back, we're going to talk about that.
Life Matters continues after this.
This is Brian Johnston of the California Pro-Life Council. Wherever medicine has been used to kill, it's proved impossible to control. Please help us stop assisted suicide in California. Go to stopassistedsuicide.com. That's stopassistedsuicide.com.
They say sunlight is the best disinfectant. Did you know that California has a law in the books that says you need to protect babies born alive in the course of an abortion? But that law is simply ignored. The current legislature and Governor Newsom's administration support all abortions all the time. And they simply do not examine or regulate the practice even though our tax dollars pay for it. We need to shine a light on this cover-up of the abortion industry in our state. Go to californiaprolife.org and click on the Light of Day Project. We need the facts about late-term abortion to be examined and made known. We need the government doing its job to protect lives. We need the light of day on this. Go to californiaprolife.org.
And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Now, I mentioned dystopia before. I just want to remind you, it sounds like a fancy word, but it's really drawn from Sir Thomas More, wrote a book called Utopia about a perfect world. Even his utopia wasn't that perfect, but a dystopia is a world in which it seems and says everything's fine, but in fact, it chillingly is not. And you know a lot of those types of dystopias, some fictional ones like 1984, like Brave New World, but it really happens. I know people who survived Nazi Germany. I know people who survived the death camps. And I know people who lived in Nazi Germany as that was going on. Most of them did not consider them to be death camps. They considered them to be work camps. And if you read some of the works of people who have been through that, even people in those camps were told they were there to work. Arbeit macht frei was the motto in German. Work will make you free. And it was clearly known by people in those camps that if you went to the doctor, and a lot of people had to go to the doctor because you weren't well fed, you weren't well treated, it was understood that you would leave the camp if you went to the doctor. You would leave through the chimney, and that was understood. I recommend, there's a great book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frunkel, and he wrote it right after he got out of the camps. He was a psychiatrist, a Jewish man from Vienna, and of course, he ended up in the camps. But he talked about what happened there and how even people in the camps just came to accept it. That's a dystopia. He actually, I commend you to read this book. It's also an audio book. You can hear him in his own words describing what it's like to live in a dystopia. My friends, you live in a dystopia right now. They're killing human beings right now because they're imperfect right now. There's a profession that used to be dedicated to only helping and never harming, but they're the ones that are doing the killing. They're the cullers. They're culling society. What happened up in New York State when basically the governor ordered those folks into those homes didn't bother a lot of people because, you know, nursing homes are where you go to die. I've had to deal with that for a long time. Our society has almost accepted that idea that a nursing home is where you go to die. What's the problem? That's a dismissive culture, and it's impacted you, even if you don't know it. So we're talking about the right to life. We're talking about medical ethics, and we're talking about what you can do about it. Dr. Marmion, what else would you like to say in terms of general practice now? We focused on the abortion issue. But what about general practice?
Well, I'd like to go in a different vein,
Sure.
if you don't mind, Brian.
Please.
Since 2005, I've been involved in intensive high-risk pregnancy care. So where women have a pregnancy complication for which they have to be hospitalized, like premature rupture of their membranes, placenta previa, bleeding in pregnancy, a baby that's not growing appropriately, toxemia. And the hospital I worked at in Vancouver, Washington, had an intensive care nursery. So we would take maternal transports from throughout Southwest Washington, and even from Oregon, as far away as Salem and down to Bend, Oregon, women coming in with serious complications in pregnancy, some really, really remote from term. We call it very, very premature, sometimes 4 months premature. Babies weighing 1.5 pounds or less, lying in for weeks at a time until the baby would be developed enough to be able to be delivered. And Brian, we experienced the same thing you experienced in the nursing home. We experienced neonatologists coming in, consulting with the patients and saying, your baby has a horrible prognosis when it is born. Your baby's born, it has a 90% chance of dying or being severely disabled. And it's going to ruin your life because it's going to be in the NICU for months. You're going to have to neglect your family. You're going to be in the NICU with your baby, taking care of it, bonding with it. The baby's got such a poor prognosis after discharge, if it survives, that it's going to be a vegetable. And it's going to take all the resources you devote to your other children, to your husband, and destroy that. Trying to get divorced if this baby survives. So our recommendation is that is that you don't treat this baby. You just let nature take its course.
Yeah.
And they would phrase it in such terminology that a woman would be very selfish and self-centered to stand up for her baby. That she'd be such a drag on society and on her own family. And lots of them chose death, or we called it a euphemism, not a euphemism. A euphemism is palliative care or comfort care, but there is no comfort care as for a newborn. Basically, what it is rocking your baby to death.
It's intentional medical abandonment in some ways.
Right.
Resources can be used, but intentionally they're not for the purposes of killing.
It's such directive counseling because they use the statistics in such a negative way that you'd be fooled to choose life-sustaining care. But the statistics say the opposite if you look at it realistically. Like what they say, a baby has a 90% chance of dying or severe disability. You can look at the same set of statistics, Brian, and you will say, if your baby lives, it's got a 60% chance of surviving without disability.
Yes.
But these doctors, these neonatologists, are so focused on the perfect child that have a society without any disabled children, that they're going to sacrifice 3 normal babies to prevent the survival of 2 babies that may have a mild or significant disability. That's the trade-off they're willing to take, and they're not willing to tell the families that's what they're doing.
Pat, thank you. We're going to have to quickly break away. I'm going to have Dr. Marmion back for our next program. We have Dr. Pat Marmion. I like that word, directive counseling. It's intentional. And these are the very people who should be advocating for life. But doctors now are the leading advocates for death in many circumstances. It's frightening. You need to be ready for it. You're listening to Life Matters. Thank you for joining us, and come back soon.
If you have questions or comments for Life Matters, call 800-924-2490. Give us your name and the town you're calling from and a quick question or comment. To follow Life Matters on all social media and to subscribe to the Life Matters podcast, go to lifematters.life, where you will find everything you need to know to share life, culture, and the battle of ideas with everyone you care about. Life Matters is a production of the California Pro-Life Council, the state affiliate of National Right to Life. Wherever you are in the nation, you can find out more at National Right to Life. You can find vital pro-life information and also find the access to your state and local Right to Life affiliate. Get informed and get involved.